Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be reviewing Josh Malerman's Daphne. This book came out in, I believe, 2022. It was on my most anticipated reads list, and then I just never got to it. Saw it at the bookstore the other day when I was looking for his newest release, Incidents Around the House, which I did read right after this, and I will be doing a review very, very shortly on. But I figured I wanted to pick this up before diving into Incidents Around the House, because Josh Malerman is one of those authors that I was still not sure what I thought of him. You probably know him from Bird Box. He is the writer behind the book that became the very famous Netflix horror movie. I am not a fan of the film, and I really did not care for the book. However, I was interested in his writing and giving him a second chance, and I picked up Goblin. Actually, I might have had it sent to me in Nightworms, I'm not 100% sure. But I did pick up Goblin, which is a, series of novellas within a novel, so they kind of all come together to tell a story, and the story is about this haunted town. It's about this, mysterious town in Michigan called Goblin, and I really enjoyed that book. I didn't love that book, but I really, really liked some of the short stories in it. Some really, really stuck with me. I was really captivated. I loved the whole narrative as a whole, and I loved the town of Goblin. So I was like, you know what? I think I want to read more of Josh Malerman, but I was really worried that his writing style was going to lean more towards Bird Box than it did towards Goblin. So I've been kind of hesitant in picking up more of his work. However, I saw Daphne at the Strand, picked it up, and had a really fun time with it. I had a really, really fun time with it. I have a lot to say about this novel, but I'm going to read the back of the book really quickly. So it says, it's the last summer for Kit Lamb, the last summer before college, the last summer with her high school basketball team and her best friend, the last summer before her life begins. But the night before the big game, one of Kit's teammates tells a ghost story about Daphne, a girl who went to their school many years ago and died under mysterious circumstances. Some say she was murdered, others say that she died by her own hand, and some say that Daphne is a murderer herself. They also say that Daphne is still out there, obsessed with revenge, and will reappear to kill again anytime someone thinks about her. As her teammates vanish one by one, Kit begins to suspect that the stories about Daphne are real, and to fear that her own mind is conjuring the killer. Now, it's a race against time, as Kit searches for the truth behind the legend and learns to face her own fears, before the summer of her lifetime becomes the last summer of her life. Mixing a nostalgic coming-of-age story and an instantly iconic female villain with an innovative new vision of classic horror, Daphne is an unforgettable thriller as only Josh Malerman could imagine. Okay, so I have two very, very important things to say about this book before I dive into it, because there are two things you really need to know before going into this for it to click with you, I think. One, this is another story in which a horror author tries to use basketball as a vessel for telling a horror story. If you're like, why are you bringing this up? It's because Stephen Graham Jones, one of his most famous novels, The Only Good Indians, has a whole section that is just about basketball. I hate basketball. And I'm sorry if you're a basketball fan. I was a college mascot. I had to go to basketball games all the time. I do not like basketball. I don't like reading about basketball. I find it very, very boring. It's not a sport that's interesting to me. And it's something that you very rarely see in horror. This book is all about basketball. It's about girls who play basketball, basketball teams, basketball summer teams, WNBA players, name dropped constantly. I didn't really know who many of them were. But unlike The Only Good Indians, where that entire scene really allows you to be a part of the game of basketball to kind of understand what's going on, this is just kind of things happen to people who like playing basketball and play basketball quite a lot, and treat the hoop of a basketball game as an almost godlike entity. So that's a little bit more extreme than what it is, but that is definitely the premise of this novel. A girl likes to ask yes or no questions, shoots the basketball into the hoop. If she makes it, it's a yes. If she misses, it's a no. And she is very much attached to that concept, almost like a magic 8-ball. The other thing about this book that I think is very, very important, and I think this is why this book worked so well for me, this is a book all about a teenager's struggle and battle with anxiety, learning what anxiety is, discovering her first panic attack, having to deal with something that she knows she cannot control. Daphne is a very, very strong, extremely well done metaphor for having anxiety. And I think you need to kind of figure that out when you first start reading the book for everything that happens by the end to make sense. Because if you take this book at full face value and you get to the ending, you're literally just going to be like, that's it. Like, it kind of just ends, right? But it's the metaphor of Daphne that actually makes the ending, at least in my opinion, really, really work. You really have to think of her as a metaphor of anxiety. This is very similar, I think, to Ronald Malfi's December Park, where I know a lot of people are unsatisfied with the ending at face value, but again, if you look at what that book is, it's a coming of age story. It's the idea of growing up and losing your innocence. If you look at the ending of that novel for its metaphor, the ending I think is perfect. Same with this. This is also a very, very heavy novel. It's very dark, it's very scary, and I loved it. This was a 5-star read for me. I couldn't believe how much I loved this. There's so much dread. There's a moment where I really thought I could tell where the direction of this novel was going. It's the very first time that you have a chapter told from the perspective of not our main character, and I really, really thought it was gonna go in this like very, very cliche direction, and then it just did this crazy 180, and after that happened, I was on the edge of my seat for the entire rest of the ride. I thought it was absolutely incredible. I think it's very, very scary. And what I think is really interesting is, even though this is told through the lens of a 17-year-old girl, and a group of 17-year-old girls actually, what I found most compelling to me is there's this random scene in this story about somebody experiencing a panic attack for the very first time while listening to a Nine Inch Nails record. This book will make you want to listen to metal music so badly. Like, Josh Malerman really, really loves heavy metal, and he really loves Trent Reznor, and it is very, very, very apparent in this story. But there's this story, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's very long, and it feels kind of out of place. And then you read the afterword of the book, and you find out that that is verbatim what happened to Josh Malerman. And again, I think it goes back to Daphne, once again, being this metaphor for anxiety, and the real horror of the story being how panic attacks and anxiety and dread can really crumble somebody's life and how to live with it. So the Trent Reznor Nine Inch Nails scene really makes a lot of sense in that context. It is actually really dark and sad, and it's one of the scenes that really sticks with you the most, even though it's probably the least scary thing in this supernatural story. It is the scariest thing when you take it and put it into reality, and I really, really loved that as well. I really liked our characters. They kind of all start out as very one-note, like, random teenage girls, and they very soon develop a lot of personality and really interesting and compelling traits. I really loved the character Natasha. I really liked her relationship with her parents. I thought that was really realistic in today's world. The same with Kit and her parents. I really, really liked the dynamic of these kind of parents who were there to be helpful but don't actually know what to do. And I loved the unraveling of who Daphne was, paralleled alongside of a detective trying to solve all of these killings that are going on around this town, who is really morally gray and honestly maybe not a good character. And I thought that was a really interesting choice for Josh Malerman to make, is to create a pivotal cop character who you are depending on solving this case and saving these girls, and just kind of making it the complete opposite of what we would typically expect from a detective in a horror story during a slew of killings in a small town. Another thing I appreciated about this is that this is set in Samhattan, which is I believe it's a fictional town in Michigan, but it is right next to Goblin in Michigan, so this is all kind of in the same world, and there is mentions of things that happen in Goblin in Daphne, which I thought was just like a very nice little nod to the world building that Josh Malerman is creating. The same is going to happen in Incidents Around the House, and I will get to that in my next review. But yeah, I loved it, and I loved the unraveling of who Daphne was, and this whole concept of how stories can get passed down from generation to generation, but also the idea of how those stories get warped, and when you're in a small town, how some kind of story like that can really have a small town in a chokehold. It really does nail small town. It's technically like a tiny city, but it felt very small townish to me, and I loved this book. And I think that if you are okay dealing with a lot of sports talk, and you are okay dealing with this primarily working as a metaphor and not something to be taken as a supernatural face value tale, I think you're really, really, really gonna like it. It's very, very dark, but I was really, really satisfied with it, and it was a 5-star read for me, and I really enjoyed it, and it made me want to read Incidents Around the House immediately afterward, and more from Josh Malerman, because I was blown away by how great this book was and how nobody's talking about it. So there you go. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah!